Good.
Joe, what are you doing here on a weekday? You didn't call for an appointment, man. It's gonna be a while.
I was afraid of this. Go ahead and sit down.
Oh!
Good. Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the kickoff to our Milwaukie Poetry Series' 19th season. And thank you all for being here, over the years at various readings, for supporting poetry, and coming to the Pond House, and now the Letting Library. It's just wonderful. So I want to welcome those of you, too, that are logged in on the live stream. So thank you all for being here. I know that there are many things that we could be doing, and there's a lot of demands on our time, and so it's great that you're choosing to spend the time here and listen to poetry. We've got a great poet tonight. I'm going to be introducing her in a few minutes. I'll call our attention to our schedule. So we've had a change in our schedule, and there are new flyers over here on the table. And for health reasons, Carolyn Martin needed to switch to the spring. So she's traded with Irene Cooper. So our October poet is going to be Irene Cooper, and reading in April is going to be Carolyn Martin. And the rest of the schedule remains the same. So one of those went out today, so that's, take that. Please do. It's there to share. Please post it up. That would just be great. I want to make some thanks. Thanks to the City of Milwaukie. So we have been supported by the City of Milwaukie from the beginning. We had our first Friday, this last Friday, over here at the conference room of the new City Hall in Milwaukie. So great. And we were supported by the mayor. The mayor came. The mayor's interested in haiku. So we wrote haikus, and it was a great event. We really appreciated that. Certainly the Letting Library. We are here in the new Letting Library. I say new, but it's been here 5 years. It doesn't really seem like 5 years because of working on it as long as many of us did. And now we have a new library, which is a new single-story library that sits on the footprint. Even though the old one was lovely, this sits on the footprint a little better. So that's great. Thank you to the Milwaukie Poetry Series Committee. We have some poetry committee members here. Kristen back here is handing out the broadsides, and the whole committee. My lovely wife Jane. And as you know, you don't have a committee. You don't have things happen unless you have people working on it. Thanks to Nate and those of you who helped with setting up the chairs. And finally, a big thanks to Willamette Falls Media and our friend Josh back here. Josh is called Josh the Magician. And he is a magician. So he's the one that makes this all go. So we appreciate Josh. Thank you for Willamette Falls Media. I want to remind you about cell phones and turning down your telephonic devices. I should say turning them off. Put them on airplane mode. We're going to proceed tonight with a reading by Andrea shortly. We'll have some questions and answers, as you know. And then Andrea is going to finish it up with a final poem. So I have been really looking forward to this reading. I want to tell you a number of things about Andrea. And this is the third time she's read here. They've all been wonderful. It's been wonderful to have her. She is the author of 6 full-length poetry collections, most recently, and now Nowhere But Here. Her first poetry-length collection, House Without a Dreamer, won the 1993 Nicholas Roerich Poetry Prize. Her fourth, Landscape with Female Figures, New and Selected Poems, 1982-2012, was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award. And her fifth, Blue Mistaken for Sky, was a finalist for the Best Book Award in Poetry from the American Book Fest. Quite a record. Andrea's poems and essays have appeared in numerous anthologies. Other honors include 2 Pushcart Prizes in poetry and literary nonfiction, and 2 poetry fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts. Listen to this. Her work has been featured by Garrison Keillor on his radio program, The Writer's Almanac, and by former United States Poet Laureate Tracy K. Smith on her podcast. The Slowdown, Billy Collins on his Poetry 180 Internet feature for high school students. Rita Dove in her Washington Post column Poet's Choice, as well as her New York Times Magazine feature poem, and Ted Kooser in his syndicated column, American Life and Poetry. In 2011, after living for more than 3 decades in the Arkansas Ozarks, where she was innkeeper of a bed and breakfast, and a writer in residence at Leon College for 22, she moved to Portland, Oregon. Our luck. During her first year here, she taught both mountain riders and at the attic. However, she suffered a serious back injury in 2016. She initiated the Ambassador Writing Seminars, which she conducted in her home until COVID, and now in Zoom. So these are a sampling of the things that she has been doing. How wonderful to ask you to welcome our poet for this evening, Andrea Hollander. Woo. Yay.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
The back injury wasn't a lie. I really did have a back injury, and that was in 2016, and I thought it healed, but it didn't. It temporarily healed, and then as I'm talking to you, I'm kind of going wildly in my head because I know some of you. In fact, I know most of you. Thank you for being here, whether I know you or not. I have timed myself, but I know that I'm a talker, so if you have any trouble hearing me, do this kind of thing, and I will try to speak closer to the mic. Okay, so I'm going to read 12 poems right now, and then I have a 13th, it's called a baker's dozen, and I'll read the last one after the Q&A. So your job is to think of really exciting questions. No, any question is exciting for me. Now, can you still hear me well? All right. So I'm going to start out by reading a poem that you have in your hands if you picked up a broadside, but I'm going to read it from the book in which it appears. Firmly married is what he said, but as he said it, swayed a little in my direction, the hair on his neck so like my son's, barely there, but golden if you bothered looking. He was looking at me anyway, no matter what he said, a benefit of having spoken his excuses, so I'd excuse anything he did thereafter. I walked away. And afterwards I thought how easily he'd escaped whatever I may have taken from that look, that he wanted it to be my invention, the way I used to pull my stockings up, pretending not to notice Richie watching when I was 19 and wanted secretly for my first time to happen already, but wanted it to be his doing, this undoing I longed for desperately, the way this man wants some blameless ruin. I'm going to read, that is a poem that appeared in my very first book, But then, of course, it's also in my new and selected, so that was easier to read it from, because I'm going to read another poem from that, my early life of writing. Many years ago, I read a novel called Transferences by a man named James Twiggs. And it was a very serious book about a very bad therapist. And it was funny, both serious and funny. And after I read it, I realized that I had my own story to tell. My poem is called Therapy. Years back, when I thought I needed that kind of listener, I paid a therapist enough to call her mine and sat in her velvet chair an hour each time and watched that hour die, and watched her face, and through her window just behind I watched the haze of Boston sky, which was so alive I thought it watched me back as I spoke my mind, and it pulled clouds across her frame from gray to darker gray. That kind of hour is like a dream, and even now I keep remembering more the way she seemed, so like a cat, stretching, purring, preening, as she sat with her shoes off and her legs curled up, and sometimes touched her mouth and sometimes scratched her brow. I remember that more than anything she did or did not say. She did not save me. She may have tried. I was lost to time and men, and in my 20s then, I kept mistaking time alone for emptiness. And then one day, she fell asleep and even snored. My voice a drone, the sky a storm, insulted, scared, cured? I guessed that was that. I tiptoed out and took the streetcar home and got a cat. It took me 15 years from that incident to be able to write the poem. I was so angry and embarrassed. Okay, I'm going to read one poem from Blue Mistaken for Sky, which is my fifth book. And it's one that I have never read in public before. So even though I've given a few readings from this book, I never read this poem. It's called Against Summer. Against, only because it was the last summer, one that began like every other, a summer of evening light and fireflies. We all stayed out as late as the parents would let us. Summer, the season when they would merely glance out and turn back to themselves. Summer, their season too. All those backyard campouts, neighborhood barbecues, summers that felt like forever until the light gave out earlier and earlier. And summer would thin into autumn and homework, out of nowhere, it seemed. We longed for summer to keep, as if that were a promise. So we'd go out onto our parents' porches and, hoping summer could be summoned back, we'd still shout across lawns lit by streetlights, as though summer could be saved for us just by our calling out to one another, that kind of summer. But September taught me to doubt, and what I had always loved of summer died into October and took my mother out of her suffering, the rabbi said. No other summer would ever come to an end without my fear of what comes after summer after summer. There were 14 repeats of the word summer in that poem. And you probably, those of you who are writers or studiers of poetry, probably recognize that it's a guzzle. 2 lines, and the second line always has to end with the same word. And the end word of the first line has to rhyme with every other end word of the first lines of every couplet. So there we go. You probably knew all that. Okay, I'm going to read 4 poems from And Now, Nowhere But Here. Before I do, I just want to thank the city of Milwaukie, Josh, who's making magic in the back, Tom for commanding all of these years that I have enjoyed this series. I may have read here twice before, but I come as often as I can. It's a wonderful series. Did I thank the library? I thank the library. We wouldn't be standing here or sitting here without it. Oh, hi, gentlemen. Sand. That's S-A-N-D. This is how I see her now, 22 and wearing a blue bathing suit, her first 2-piece, but not yet a bikini, and walking an empty beach in late afternoon, tossing a chunk of driftwood to her dog, big and gray, who galumphs back each time, clumps of wet sand flying, the dog soaked, dripping, sometimes dragging a tangle of dark green kelp he drops at her feet, the stick forgotten, and she laughs at the sight of him. And this goes on until they both tire, and she finds a place among the dunes to lie down, the dog panting at first beside her, then quieting, the steady rhythm of the ocean calming until the dark cloud of a man hovers above them. And if not for the dog, the rest of this story would consist of details you would not want to read. Words like crush and straddle, split and thrust, if I dared write about it. And although later she finds sand in the grooves of her sandals, and even after a shower, more between her between her toes and in her scalp, thanks to her dog, now decades dead, sand is still a word she can love. So, those of you who've read books of mine before or actually have gotten to know me beyond the books probably know that I had a very long, mostly happy marriage that lasted 35 years. The last year of those 35 years was hell. And this poem gives you a sense of how that hell kind of began. And also, this is the first time I've read this poem out loud, except to myself. The moment I knew. He was driving, one of those 2-hour trips to Little Rock we took when we needed things we couldn't get in our small Ozark town. I asked if I could read him a poem I'd fallen in love with. The poem was, I admit, subtle. The poet never states outright that his brother is now dead, only that together they defined the poet's childhood, the old oak they climbed despite their parents' wishes, the Yiddish songs whose lyrics they changed to fit family stories, the oatmeal they detested for its texture and emptied down the kitchen drain. A splendid childhood, the way I'd always felt about our marriage, a thing created together that would not otherwise exist. Was my husband even listening? Maybe he was distracted by the traffic on the highway, the line of trucks passing, their gears grinding, my voice almost hoarse as I tried to raise it above the roar. Maybe it was the pleading in my voice I could not conceal. I must have hoped poetry would save us, but his face, the face that used to turn toward me when I read, glancing at me if we were in the car, that face stared straight ahead as if something beyond us was the only thing that mattered. He didn't even blink. Thanks for the water, Tom. Okay. This poem doesn't need any introduction. It just needs a title. Ending in both darkness and light. I thought I'd be afraid of living in a small house in the middle of a forest. Thought I'd be afraid of copperheads that sometimes crossed our paths, the paths to our car, or ice storms that followed winter rains and lasted for days, downing trees and electrical poles, rendering our house so cold we had to wear our winter coats and hats indoors. I thought I'd fear those late spring winds, so fierce they yanked off roofs, demolished barns, and once the firehouse, another time our hospital. I was afraid of those, their suddenness, and lightning storms. Of bears, I wasn't scared. I'd never seen a bear. A raccoon ripped out a window screen and ransacked everything. It took us weeks to clean its feces from the furniture and floors. It could have rabies, we were warned, and stay away from possums and coyotes. The only possums I had seen were dead ones on the road. In all the years I lived there, I never saw coyotes. But through the dark, the night before my husband left, I heard one wail all night. Probably many of you know the local poet John Brehm. Well, he's a very good friend of mine, and every few weeks we get together and talk about the poems we're working on and help one another to hear things we can't hear on our own. And this poem came out of something he said to me during one of those times together. Puzzle. My friend John wants me to stop writing divorce poems. I've tried, I tell him, but can't, and I'm puzzled. It's been years since the divorce, and I'm sure I've moved on. He asks what I want from these poems, why I think I'm still writing them. I want to be done writing them, I tell him. But sometimes I remember one of my ex's myriad duplicities, each like an almost identical piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle, depicting a black hole or a single panel of one of Rauschenberg's white paintings, which in this analogy might be titled The 35-Year Deception. each lie not the same lie, each piece a woman he met through an app or an ad, online or inline at Walmart, Walgreens, even the Home Depot. One in her 20s took him for $2,000 and kept stringing him along, but never finally slept with him. My ex told me this, I tell John, as if that fact could erase what he did and kept doing. During his confession, he couldn't remember which woman was which and kept correcting himself the way one might try to position and reposition the same puzzle piece into a place that looks exactly right, but isn't. I know enough should be enough, and I want this to be my last poem about that man. It's rare that I think about him, I say. So why, and now I'm really talking to myself, does he appear in a poem I'm writing about something else? One thing's for sure, puzzles have always intrigued me, so I don't give up. I never gave up even on the Jackson Pollock that overtook our dining table for months. And I didn't give up on the Milky Way, so large we finally moved it to the garage, where we laid it with care on a workbench not much in use. That same year, I tell John, I sent a snapshot to a company that offered to make an enlargement into a jigsaw puzzle. The three of us posed together one winter in red, matching woolen hats, snow whitening the rooftop of our house behind us, the sky solid and blue above it, a Norman Rockwell. After our son fit his father's blue eyes into his father's face, he wanted us to frame and hang it above the piano, but we never did. And it stayed on one side of the dining table till mid-February, which still puzzles me, a woman who almost obsessively gets things done without much delay. Every time I walked past it, I saw what appeared at first to be a perfect family, but up close revealed the fine jigsawed lines and odd shapes that pay no regard to content, our faces crazed like pieces of expensive porcelain, or like the faces in paintings by old Dutch masters, subtleties of expression and the truths behind them obscured over time by varnish that darkens and discolors even the snow. I don't have a good reason, I finally tell John, hoping he'll see what I am beginning to accept when I sit down to write. Like my philandering ex, a poem will, no matter the cost or consequence, and without any consideration of me, go wherever it wants, whenever it wants, to satisfy its desires. I got even. Actually, I think that my husband probably has a personality disorder or something. It's easier to live with when you think of it that way. So finally, I'm going to read 5 poems that are new, and hopefully maybe will appear in my next book whenever that happens. Beloved. I had one and said so many times, though time, as it does, and it always does, moved him from present tense to past. And then when I saw any man place his hand low on the back of a woman in that spot, my own now empty of touch, how could I not remember? So I looked elsewhere as the bus or the streetcar that carried me in my look anywhere else time, that in time, as everyone says, became less tense, and the past grew smaller, until, like the web that stopped me on my walk after the spider took what was trapped and left the web vacant, dew-covered, iridescent, irresistible, as if nothing had happened. The web, like me, meant only to last for whatever time it takes to disappear. If you are familiar with a British poet named Edward Thomas, could you just raise your hand? Okay, we have a handful. Well, he was a British prose writer who became very good friends with Robert Frost when Robert Frost was living in England. And you probably know the poem of Frost called The Road Not Taken. And you may have read or learned somehow that that poem didn't mean what we think it means or meant. It was actually kind of a tease, T-E-A-S-E, tease to Edward Thomas. It was written for him and sent to him because Edward Thomas had a hard time making decisions. And the big decision that he was thinking about making was whether he should follow Robert Frost back to the States after Frost left, or whether he should volunteer for the Army. It was World War I, and that's what he decided to do, and he died on the battlefield. He wrote a wonderful poem called Addlestrop. I'm not going to read that poem, but if we have time later, maybe. But here's my response to that poem. I call mine Arrival. And my poem takes place in England, which is one of the reasons I thought about writing it. Arrival. I climbed off the train, the clumsy sound of my wheeled suitcase trembling down its steep steps. Mid-August, the heat barely bearable. On the emptying platform, a couple of men sat, though not together, on the long wood bench pressed against the station wall's dark red brick. A child began to cry, its mother hushing it. The train's whistle, its rumbling away, the emptiness afterwards. Between the rails, random patches of leafy green weeds, a handful of yellow dandelions, a few glum, scattered sheets of wet newsprint, and what looked to be a flattened diaper. The sky cloudless and blue. Horsham. I doubt I'll ever forget its name, printed in all caps on the broad sign above the station. The sudden call of an ordinary field sparrow, its lone sound, a bomb. And that's B-A-L-M, not B-O-M-B. So now we're going back in time to when I was in high school. After the dance at his college, such rotten luck. My whole family asleep, and I'm terrified to ring the bell. My key misplaced somewhere or lost. I keep apologizing to this boy who held my hand until I rolled down the window of his car and puked. Our last date, I fear. 16, I should have ordered root beer, not a whiskey sour. And didn't know I should have eaten first. He'd had a Schweppes and rum, but only one. Now on my porch, we're both mute. He inches toward the steps, afraid I'll retch again or try to reach for him. My breath is foul, my hair a mess. The light comes on. Vomit streaks my dress. Unfortunately, that was true also. So I have two more poems before the Q&A, and I hope you're queuing up for the Q&A. Otherwise, Tom has to ask all the questions. So this poem takes place in my apartment. The ambassador, some of the people in this room live there as well. Thank you, friends and neighbors, for coming. And it also, as you'll hear, reaches back into other times of my life. The title just enjams into the first line of the poem. Late winter, and a couple of crows linger in the giant elm out front. I love that tree, love it. Once, I loved a stuffed monkey I named Zippy, after a real monkey on a children's TV show. Mine, too, dressed like Davy Crockett, fake brown suede jacket, fake raccoon cap. I kept him seated against the pillow on my bed, the spread pink with tiny sequins sewn into stripes down its length. Zippy's sweet, flexible face shaped into a permanent smile to greet me. The elm, the monkey, the stark loneliness of childhood. Now, too, I think of Kenny, the first boy I ever kissed. High school juniors, not in love, but going steady to fit in with our tight circle of friends. When my girlfriends said they French kissed, I didn't know what they meant, but was too embarrassed to ask and giggled with them. Ask me anything now, and I'll try to tell you how it was, who I was then, no matter how much such memories still hurt. Placid, almost white, this afternoon sky calms me. One of the two crows lifts up into it, hesitates, disappears. I took Zippy with me to college, then saw that my roommate had placed nothing on her bed, her spread a handmade quilt she said her mother made. I left him in my suitcase, slid it under my bed. That first week, Kenny sent me a couple of letters from his college, then nothing, then a card with a picture of blue posies on front. Inside, he told me about another girl. In the elm now, only the single left behind crow. Without leaves, the tree looks desolate, the bird not moving. Maybe it's not a crow, but a dead leaf. My pink bedspread was too pink, the sequins too gaudy, even for a girl. At night in the dorm, when I couldn't sleep, I worried that Zippy couldn't breathe. Some of you may know Justin Rigamonti. He's a young friend of mine who's in his 40s, and he could be my son if I had been his mother. In any case, he and his sweetheart, Jessie Carver, got married recently. And, this poem will tell you why I wrote it. You probably all know that an epithalamium is another fancy word for wedding poem, and that's the name of this poem, Epithalamium. My friends asked me to write a poem for their wedding, but not one about them. Write about community, they say, about connection or shared existence. Shit, I think. My best poems rarely stay on subject, most starting in one place and closing somewhere in my decades-long marriage that ended in divorce. A taboo topic for a wedding poem. Or about my ill-fated parents, their unmet needs, their untimely deaths, subjects clearly off limits. I want to write a poem that in 10 years, 20, my friends will read and still believe in, not one about my own bad luck or poor decisions, the failures or raw misfortunes I'll never outlive. I have no wisdom about community, connection, or shared existence. And given my history, I wouldn't expect anyone to accept anything I might say about marriage. Instead, let me take the advice I give my students. Write to discover what you don't know about something you do. I do know a lot about the house in the Ozark woods I built with my husband and son, about the garden I planted beside it in my early 30s. I don't know why I'm thinking now of that time, that place. Perhaps it's because I was like that garden, whose green beginnings flourished there, lettuces and radishes, marigolds and freesias, fresh herbs like the peppermint and rosemary you plant only once, and year after year they persist, their distinctive aromas clinging to your fingers for hours. At that house, light found its way through every window at different times of day and night in every season. Living there, you could follow sunlight or moonlight from room to room. How much I did not know until those years spent in that house, those woods. Friends, may you thrive like that garden. May you know that kind of light. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for being here. And
Thanks for inviting me.
yes. So you've been thinking up about questions, queuing up. Look at this, right here.
Tell us about why you started writing poetry.
Okay, and I'm going to always repeat the question because I remember what it's like to either be in the back of a room or being watching this from home, because this is being recorded. So the question was, how did I start writing poetry? Why did I start? Well, when I was a kid, I enjoyed writing, but I did it with my cousin Brenda, who lived next door, and we wrote plays, and then we charged our parents 5 cents to come watch the play, that kind of thing. And so it was not something foreign to me, just writing. I wasn't ever thinking poetry. I was just thinking how much fun it is to make things up. And then I did what everybody does. I went to school. I learned about poetry, and I actually hated it because I had no idea what it meant, and the teacher didn't either. So I wasn't thinking poetry. But then when I was 23, my mother died. She was only 51, and she and I were so close. And I don't know, I think that every human being, whether you ever think of yourself as a poet, when something huge happens that takes you emotionally, you reach for a pen or a computer or something because you have to get it out of you somehow. So that is actually how I started. It started in grief, really. I read some poems in anthologies when I was looking for teachers, and I found them. They were all in these anthologies. I had gone to a bookstore and I asked, can you please give me a guide to the kind of poetry that somebody might read at a funeral, is what I asked. And the proprietor of the store showed me a couple of those books, and I bought one. And I fell in love with so many poets, dead and alive. And I started an apprenticeship. I remember thinking to myself, this is the kind of stuff I want to write, but how do I do it? So I started just studying other people's poems in this way, just saying, okay, I know what's going to happen. I could even memorize the poem and I would still be having fun reading it. Why? What is it the poet is doing to make me want to keep coming back to it? And I'm still doing that. So I'm still feeling like I have a lot to learn. David?
I forgot to mention, Kristen has a microphone.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and if you could wait till she gets there, because we'd like to get the question. We
So
get the answer, but not the question.
I just have to know if you paid the therapist before you tiptoed out.
You used the microphone, but I didn't understand a word except I heard therapist.
Did you pay the therapist before you tiptoed out?
Oh, did I pay the therapist before I tiptoed out? Well, no, I didn't. And I had another appointment with her, and it took all my energy to get myself to go to that appointment. And I walked in, and I sat down, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she said, "What's going on?" And I said, "You fell asleep when I was here last week." And she was quiet for a minute, and she says, "Well, we're all human." And then she said, "And I won't charge you for this session." And I never went back. Any other questions? Tanya and John, in that order. But the microphone's coming to you.
Yeah.
Tanya.
Oh, great. Excuse me.
Hi, I have a question, but I just wanted to precede that with something you had just said about how you started writing, and that just struck me with, I wonder what would have happened if these things that were grief-stricken and maybe bad luck, or however what would you be writing about? That's not my question, but it just struck me.
If I understood your question.
That wasn't. It was just a comment, because how can we say what you would be doing otherwise, right? But my question is, as you've read through Time, I find a lot of joy at the end, and I wondered if the revising or writing process has changed for you in this last set of poems. How do you know when you're done? And even when they are done, do you still continue writing them for yourself?
So the basic question I'm understanding is revising. Is that about? Or did you notice something different about these newer poems?
Not only in their joyousness, but I just wondered if with the joyous response I was feeling, if you were writing them in a different way. And I just wondered when something is done for you, if you continue privately continuing.
Well, no, I would be happy just to say that it's a joy to be able to write at all. And it doesn't matter whether the subject matter is something you're happy about or not. The process of being able to express what turns out to be something that other people feel, and you don't know that until you share the poem, of course. But I fall in love with other people's poems all the time, and they speak to me as if I wrote them, as if they were mine. And there's joy in that, of course. Joy to read poems to people who care to listen. But also, I look forward to going to my notebook and writing. I never start with something I know. I try to start, as that poem told you, with something I don't know, or something that I don't know whether I know or not. I even start with, I sometimes open an anthology and copy the first line down. No, don't read the poem. It's by somebody else, but don't read the whole poem. Just write down that line, write down the page number, close the book, and give myself 10 minutes till the iPhone rings. And if I don't hear the ring because I'm suddenly got involved in writing, then that's what I want. And I will end up probably writing something I didn't know I knew about something I do know something about. You got that? Thanks, Tanya. John.
Andrea, I think you answered my question, but how do you come up with the titles? Do you start writing when you get inspired and then the process of writing gives you the title, or do you come up with the title of the poem and then start writing about the subject?
Both, actually. Sometimes I just have a first line and I write it, and it turns out when I'm working on the poem, I realize that that first line is the title. And sometimes I just start with a title for some reason. I don't necessarily, couldn't give you exactly the reason why that happens. But it's a working title, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't work, just like us.
Thank you.
Titles are important. I always think of them as the first breath of the poem, but when you get to the first line and the title together, in order for the poem to be something that the person reading it would want to keep reading, those two, the combination of the title and the first line, ought to spark something in the reader to make that reader want to find out more. So that's kind of a generic way of speaking it. It's much easier if I just gave you examples, but I don't have any in my head right now. Yes?
Hi, Andrea. If you've ever had a period of time where you could no longer pick up the pen or pick up the page, how long was your longest period? If that's ever happened, how long was your longest period where you just had to step away for reasons perhaps unknown?
Well, that happened last year after I had a knee replacement. I mean, I couldn't even think straight because I was in lots of pain for a long time, and I wasn't eating properly, and I was pretty depressed, and I kept thinking this is never going to work. My knee is never going to heal. So I just felt sorry for myself, and I think you're allowed to do that sometimes. But I would read. If I don't write, I think reading feeds the same part of me that writing does. And it's refreshing when you don't have to do the writing yourself, and yet, of course, I miss it when I don't do it. So I don't know how long, except I also teach, and I love teaching as well, and preparing for the classes that I teach, and reading everybody else's poems so I can find the right ones to bring to a class that I'm going to teach, so we can learn together something. I don't know if that answers it, but that's it.
We have 2 questions through the live stream.
Okay, from Amy Miller. Hi, Andrea. Can you talk about strategies for handling anger in poems? How do you make an angry poem approachable to the reader?
I think you heard an angry poem. That poem Puzzle, I got pretty angry. But at the same time, I was also making things up, having fun. It took me 44 complete revisions for that poem to become what it was, and it took me more than a year of continually working on it. So I get a lot of anger out when you just do something over and over again. I think writing helps. I mean, whatever the emotional state, even if you never share it with anybody.
And from Sean Evaningo Sanders. Hi, Andrea. I love how the poems in your books fit together. Do you have a particular book idea or theme in mind when you write your poems, or does the thread lacing them together reveal itself later on?
So I think what you said, if I heard you correctly, was in arranging poems in a book, and how do you go about that? You ask Paul Ann Peterson to help you. There's lots of ways, and it depends, of course, on what's in the poems and how you want the reader to take the journey through the book of poems with you. It's not a whole lot different from writing a poem, making sure that you have the information in the right order so someone else who doesn't know you can appreciate it, and the poem can become theirs, and so the book could become theirs too. Yes. Susanna, right?
Yes, right. So something that struck me in all the pieces, this is the voice of someone who had no siblings or in some way had no one that took the place of siblings, providing some example before things happened, or, everything was a shock. It seemed as if everything that was an experience was not explained or prepared in any way, and that the writer had to figure it all out for herself in the most difficult way. So I guess whether you had siblings.
My parents, when I was 11 years old, adopted a 4-day-old baby, and so I had a brother, but when I went off to college, I was just turned 17 and he had just turned 6. So it was like we were both sibling-free, in a sense. I babysat for him, but we ended up having a wonderful relationship many, many, many years later. Unfortunately, when he got cancer, then we started talking every other day. And I wrote to him, sent him pictures of himself from his childhood that I had. And we got very close during his last 6 years of life. So you're right about your intuition from just what I chose to read. Thank you.
You are now our sibling. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's a very sweet thing to say. It's 7 o'clock. Should we turn to the last poem?
Is there a final question?
I-
Anyone that's something you've been thinking about?
I do. Yeah. So I've been writing for a long time, but I just recently discovered through another poet who read through the series here that, please forgive me, I didn't know, or it didn't occur to me that you could make things up. I just had no idea until she had a sibling in the audience and they were like, we didn't have a dog. And I was like, whoa. What? And it sounds so, but how I write is I write out exactly how it happened. So that was like a lightning bolt to me, and I'm still working through it. It took a lot of courage to admit that. But is there anything that happened to you in your writing career, that lightning bolt, where you were like, oh, I didn't realize you could do that in writing, or I didn't realize that kind of transformed the way that you were thinking about yourself?
Yeah, I'm like you. I was coming of age as a potential writer during what they call the confessional poets. And so what happens is that you start to think that you have to be absolutely 100% factual.
Yeah.
Well, anybody who has a sibling knows that your facts about something that happened and hers are not the same. So who's making something up if you both think you're telling the truth?
Yeah.
So I think over time I stopped thinking about that. If I pictured my mother in a yellow apron, what the hell? She never had a yellow apron, but so what? It worked in the poem. And so I just let whatever comes out come out, and I don't care if it's true in terms of fact, but it always, for me, has to be true in terms of the emotional aspect of it. And sometimes you have to change the facts to get to the truth. And I know I'm not the first person to say that.
Wow. And so is there anything in particular that you learned that really changed the way you wrote?
No, I just realized that it was fun to just let myself go, whether it was all true or not. Not every one of the puzzles in the puzzle poem was an actual puzzle. But it was in the poem, so therefore it is.
Love. Thank you.
That sounds like the final question.
Okay, so I will read one more poem, and it's one of the new ones. And it's another poem in which the title starts to bleed into the first line of the poem. Writing a poem should be easy. My neighbor, not a poet, once told me. But today, between the clatter of boys on skateboards out front and the robot voice of the light rail train at the stop across the street telling passengers its destination, I'm stuck. Hemingway famously said, "Writing is easy. All you have to do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed." Ha. Years ago, I tried drafting poems on my father's old Remington, but the clickety-clack felt foreign. For me, noiselessness is necessary. For almost 3 decades, I wrote with the fountain pen my son brought me from France. I loved the smooth and silent way it slipped across the page. My best poems were housed in its ink. Writing is easy, Mark Twain wrote. All you have to do is cross out the wrong words. Last week, one of the skateboarders almost ran me down on the sidewalk in front of my building. Some days, I barely hear the train. Other days, I take it north to visit my son, his partner, and my young granddaughter. Writing is easy, claim a host of prose writers, always tongue-in-cheek. At least the poet Dorothy Parker, no relation to the Parker Pen Company, said, "I hate writing. I love having written." Last April, I dropped the French fountain pen, which landed on its tip, embedding itself into the oak flooring, ruined. Now I write with a gel pen, a dozen to a box. Thank you. Don't go anywhere. I just want to take a picture to prove to my son that I do have an audience. So here we go over on this side, and on this side, and on the very special side. Thank you all for coming.
Two things before we break up. One I forgot to do earlier, but we have the Oregon Poet Laureate Emerita with us, Paul Ann Peterson. Thank you for being here. Secondly, we also sponsor First Friday readings, and one of our October featured readers is here tonight. David Rutizer and Gary Lark are going to be our October First Friday poets. So please join us then. Here are the books over here. There are some refreshments. Please help yourself to the refreshments. See you on October 8th, we hope. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Tom. Yeah.